Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, very, very happy to be here tonight to present the 2020 biennial budget. We will get you this slideshow presentation. I'm going to, in the interest of time tonight, and we're going to kind of drill through this in the month of July. I'm going to be a little bit brief, so I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly. Because I know Emily's got a presentation and she's dying to get up here, so, and I don't want to stand her in her way. She's got props tonight too, so I saw them coming in. So
Props?
I would like to,
I didn't.
Probs or
Props. Okay, I thought props.
got props.
Oh, please.
I would like to say before I get started, my thanks to the whole organization that put this budget together. Obviously our executive team, all the department directors are our budget team, and they do a lot of work on this. And then, of course, our budget staff, Matt and his folks have done it, and Diana and her folks have done a tremendous job on this project this year and the budget. So I appreciate very much the work that everybody put into the budget. I want to talk a little bit, just to refresh everybody kind of where we are, and I'll spend a little bit of time on this. This is the second year of a two-year budget. You remember we started the two-year budget in 2016, and the idea was, as this slide says, to really kind of focus us on more on the long-term, long-range plans, really how it fits in with the strategic plan, to take a longer-term view, because we really, I think, had got into a situation as an organization that we really were kind of focused on, let's get through this budget, particularly as we went through the recession and coming out of the recession. It was kind of, let's just get through this budget, we'll worry about next year. And so the two-year budget really kind of gave us that longer term view. It also helps us be consistent from year to year. And time is a big deal for us. We're a large enough organization. I see Councilmember Campbell shaking his head. He gets this from the state perspective too. We're a large enough organization that the budget takes a lot of time, a lot of staff time for an organization. And if we can condense that, because we're hitting kind of 2 years at a time, and then we spend the next year doing some special projects type work with our analysts, then that helps our organization. So for instance, this year, I can tell you, we probably, last year, I don't remember what the count was, but it seemed like we did like 150 budget team meetings. This year, I think we did about 3. So it's just a much easier process for us. And again, the same thing I think is for the council as well. So where are we? We're in the second year. Our first year is when we develop the biennial budget. It gets developed and reviewed. The first year is officially, formally adopted by the city council, and the second year is conditionally adopted. Then when we roll into the second year, which is where we are this year, the budget may be revised if we need to reflect any revenue changes or major revenue changes, major expenditure changes, or program changes, but then that budget is formally adopted by the council. Now, what we've tried to do, and we're doing again this year, every year that we've had a second year budget, we adhere to what we presented to you the first year. So that's the same this year. There's no change to the bottom line of our budget, any of our funds this year. It's exactly what you saw last year. There is a slight change in the number of positions that we're asking for, and I'm going to explain that a little bit more in depth as I go through the presentation. But in terms of the bottom line, in terms of the increases to the budget, in terms of rate increases, things like that, everything is exactly the same as what we presented to you guys last year. So really nothing new in the budget. But it does reflect our community priorities. And one of the things you'll remember as I drill through this again, we kind of had a Olathe is something. So we talked about Olathe is listening. We do listen as an organization. Our direction finder, we're very strategically aligned to what we do. Our direction finder and all of our performance measurements drive what we are, the decision making for the council, which then drives our budget. The same thing goes. Now we're starting a new strategic planning process, and we've gotten I think over almost 3,600, 4,000-ish people that have spoken into our strategic planning process. We had a meeting last week on the strategic planning process. We're really getting that thing down to a final point where we'll present to you guys in the next couple of months the strategic plan, and I think you're going to be really, really excited to see it. But again, that will then do the same thing it's done for the last 20 years. That'll drive our budget process. That'll drive our performance metrics. That'll drive our quarterly direction finder results. So we do listen to the citizens, and really our budget reflects that. We're also financially sound. We have a AA+ bond rating. We've continued to maintain that. Continuing to do all the things to get even closer to a AAA rating. Not quite there yet, but I think we're continuing to progress on that. We do have a balanced budget, and one of the things we're most proud of, and we talk about this every time we do Direction Finder on the annual process, we're in the top 10% of the nation in terms of Direction Finder scores for value for tax dollar. Now, why is that important? Each one of you guys know, every time I speak about value for tax dollars with our staff, I ask everybody in the room that likes to pay taxes to raise their hand. Surprisingly, I never get anybody to raise their hand, right? So I say, so why do we ask this question? Well, nobody likes to pay taxes, but it's important to us that people understand and give us feedback on the fact that they feel there is value for the dollar they pay. So I can tell you that we're very proud of the fact that we're almost twice the national average on this. National average is in the mid to low 30s. We're in the high 60s to we have been in the high 70s in the past, or low 70s in the past. So very, very proud of this, because that tells us that our citizens, while everybody may not pay, but you heard one person say that tonight, very happy to pay the taxes because they know they're getting a return on an investment in the community. So we're very, very happy with that. We're also fiscally sound because we maintain our fiscal stability. One of the things that Diane and her folks, every time we do a bond rating call from the rating agencies, they want to talk about our fiscal management. And so I can tell you that we always get very, very strong marks on that. Some of that's because of the things we talked about. Debt guidelines. The council has debt guidelines that you've approved. There are about 8 or 10 specific things that you guys want us to look at every year when we do a budget to make sure that we're meeting those debt guidelines. This budget does comply with those debt guidelines. We also meet our targeted fund balance. You guys have a policy in the general fund that we have a 10% fund balance, 10% of our general fund revenues in fund balance. Well, but you have a target of 30%, and we've maintained that 30% target for I don't know how many years, but many, many years. And so again, that sends a very, very strong message to the rating agencies. Also maintains our mill levy. Remember, we did a quarter mill decrease in 2019, but this does maintain the mill levy. All our other rate increases, 3.5% for water in 2020, 4.5% for sewer, which are very reasonable increases. And then no increase for stormwater and no increase for solid waste for 2020 proposed in this budget. By the numbers, our general fund's about almost 70% made up of transportation and public safety. Those are the number 1 and number 2. They go back and forth, priorities for our community. And as I said, we listen, and so we feed that back to the citizens in terms of budget priorities. Most of our money going to spend or to support those 2 areas. All other departments make up about 30%. On the right-hand side, the budget for the 2020 general fund is about almost a 5% budget increase, 4.95%, including everything. We'll propose to add 9 positions in the general fund. So that brings us to about 4.5 employees per 1,000. So again, you just see pre-recession, we were at about 5.5. Now we're at 4.5, almost 1 full employee per 1,000 less than we were pre-recession. Revenues, where do our revenues come? This story hasn't changed in pretty much the 20 years I've been here. About 50% of our budget's made up of sales tax, 20% made up in property tax, 10 or 11. It's always been for franchise fee, and everything else in transfer 7, other 7, and charges for service 5. Been this way for a long time. Our expenditures, on the expenditure side, we're about 64% personnel services. My recollection is recession, we were at 68 or 69% personnel services, so I'm pretty happy with that. We've maintained a lower percentage of our costs in personnel services even post-recession. So again, contractual services about 18%, transfers 12%, and commodities 5%. Where the revenue's coming from, we're forecasting about a 4.1% increase in sales tax for 2020, 5% increase in assessed valuation. That's a little. You may say, oh, I saw Councilmember Campbell. That's a little bit lower than the presentation you got the other day. But if you remember, we always are a little bit lower than you get the presentation from the tax assessor's office, because they give us the numbers they give us are help me out, pre-appeals, thank you, went blank, pre-appeals, so we always are a little bit more conservative than the assessor's office, because it's a pretty substantial, again, 20% of our revenue base, and we'd rather be a little bit conservative on that. So if it does better than we think, we got a little bit of an upside. Franchise fees have been pretty flat for several years, about 2.4% increase in that. That's what we're proposing. Always council looks at these things. We have what's general fund cash going into capital projects. We have about $550,000 in public building maintenance. If you remember, we upped this to $550,000 about 4 years ago. We used to be around the $300,000 range, and did a study, felt like we needed to do more to fund, to take care of what you got philosophy. So that's up to $550,000 now, which gives us a good amount. $350,000 for some of our park facility maintenance, and then street preservation. One of the things you might remember is we committed to the voters when they approved our park sales tax or our street sales tax to increase our cash portion of street preservation from the general fund. When we started that, we were at $1.6 million. So we are now at $3 million, and we go up $200,000 every year. So I think, and Matt, boy, I don't remember those numbers. 2.1% total, was that when we started? And now we're 2.7%. So again, the proportion, thanks Matt, the proportion of our dollars that are going into this have increased over those years. So not only has it gone up $200,000 a year, but it's also a larger portion of our general fund budget than it was at that particular time when we started. Olathe is a safe community. I'm going to talk a little bit about the positions that we've got in the budget and kind of drive towards the end. First of all, fire responses continue to go up. We did about 12,628 calls for service this year. Most of those are medical calls now, and we continue to revamp how we respond to those calls with the MIH, the medical. Help me out, Chief. Where's he at? Oh, he's gone. Yeah, Mobile Integrated Health. Yes, thank you. I knew MIH. Anyway, this is audience participation.
I like it. I like it.
So with the MIH program, with the squads, all that helps us very much really reorient how we respond to calls. In the building codes, we processed 5,000, almost 6,000 community enhancement cases last year. So that turns also into staffing. We are proposing to add another community enhancement officer in the budget in 2020. We added one in 2019. We'll propose to add another one in 2020, and also fire station number 8. The new location gets started in construction in 2020 in the CIP. Now, I did get an email from the chief. We are starting, I think, this week. We transitioned over from 40-hour staff to full-time 24/7 staff at the current location for Station 8, so that was a big milestone for us as well in that area. Police, we responded to almost 45,000 calls for service, continues to increase, and processed almost 30,000 items in the property unit. So our proposed budget this year, 3 additional school resource officers starting in July of 2020. This will basically get us back to the pre-recession position of an SRO in every high school and every middle school. So this fills that out. This is the other item is the new thing, quote unquote, in the budget. We are able to do it with no increase in the bottom line, but we did get awarded a COPS grant, which if most of you guys have been around for a while, you know that the way that works. First year, federal government puts 75% into it. Second year, 50%. Third year, 25%. And the fourth year, we have them 100%. So we're adding those, proposing to add those positions. We did get that grant. We're excited about that. And then finally, the police building expansion also will, phase 2 of that project will also begin in 2021. Olathe is also moving. Public Works maintains 132 traffic signals and almost 12,000 street lights. And they also maintain 1,300 miles of street lanes, 4,000 intersections, and 18 roundabouts. So what are we doing for Public Works and Transportation? These are most of the money that's going to be, there's only one new position in Public Works that we're asking for. And I'll talk about that in a second, but most of the stuff we wanted to highlight was CIP. 8 transportation, major transportation programs, 18 major street improvement projects, 6 benefit districts, 10 stormwater projects. All that we'll talk about specifically as we go through the budget in July. The one position that we're asking for is a senior planner, specifically for our downtown. Really trying to, with all the things that are happening in our downtown, we really feel like we really need a person that really kind of becomes the downtown manager and is really focused on the downtown as we're really entering into that phase of hopefully a renaissance in our downtown. Olathe community, we maintain 1 million square feet of building, shelters, and storage, and 147 miles of corrugated metal pipe and stormwater system, which is a big deal. Can be a problem. So we're trying to get on top of that as well. A couple of things. We have 2 proposed position ads in this area. One is another facility maintenance tech. You guys were generous enough to give us a facilities maintenance tech this year in 2019. We asked for another one for next year to really beef up our facility maintenance. One of the things, we talked about this last year, but we'll talk about it. You know, what we found was that we were really short-staffed, and we're really paying a good bit of money for outside people to come in and do things that really we could have the expertise to do, and it would save us money. So you were gracious enough to give us that position last year, and we're asking for one more next year. And then another person in stormwater maintenance to deal with that corrugated metal pipe. It is a big deal. We have not had some of the issues that some of our neighbors like Shawnee have had, but we do have issues with cave-ins and things like that from time to time as that pipe wears out, and we do have to get on top of that for the future. So conditionally approved investments for police officers with the 75% COPS grant funding, 1 community enhancement officer, 3 school resource officers starting in July 2020, and 1 senior planner. Those are the positions in the general fund that we have asked for. This is just kind of an outline of our all funds budget. And again, we'll talk much more in detail on all this stuff as we go through the workshops in July. But I think we're at around a 5% budget increase, all funds. Wasn't that about right? For 5.8 for all funds. We're about 4.9 for the general fund. And then the last slide is our budget calendar. Tonight's the budget presentation by the city manager. And again, thanks to all the folks that helped work on this thing. And then what we've got is 2 workshops planned in July. These are the off Tuesdays in July. We'll do these at the community center. So the first night, July 9th, we'll do all the department presentations, which you guys really enjoy. Gives you an opportunity to hear from all of our department directors. And we'll do the general fund, including the library fund as well. And then we'll do all the other funds, recreation and all the utility funds on that second workshop, which will be the third or the fourth Tuesday in the month, July the 23rd. We do the official public hearing, which is required by state law, on August 6th, and then hopefully adopt the budget on August the 20th.